Chapter 1. Amelia Finds a Special Watch. Amelia liked to explore. She loved looking at old things. One day, she went up to her grandfather's attic. Attics are rooms at the top of houses where people keep old things. Amelia's grandfather had a lot of old stuff in his attic. Amelia looked around the attic. She saw dusty boxes and old furniture. She saw books and clothes from a long time ago. But what caught her eye was a small, shiny object on a table. It was an old watch. Watches are things people wear on their wrists to tell time. Amelia picked up the watch carefully. It felt cold and heavy in her hand. The watch was not like the ones she saw before. It had a shiny metal case with intricate designs. There were tiny buttons on the side. Amelia was curious about it. She looked closer at the watch. The glass on its face was a bit cracked, but she could still see the numbers inside. The hands of the watch were not moving. Amelia wondered if it could still work. Amelia noticed a small knob on the side of the watch. She turned it gently, and to her surprise, it started ticking softly. The sound was like a tiny heartbeat. Amelia smiled with excitement. She wound the knob a few more times. Then she noticed the tiny buttons on the watch. One of them looked like it could be pressed. Amelia hesitated for a moment. She wondered what would happen if she pressed it. Would the watch do something magical? Curiosity got the better of Amelia. She took a deep breath and pressed the button. Suddenly, something strange happened. Amelia felt a tingling sensation all over her body. It was as if the ground beneath her feet was shifting. She blinked her eyes, and when she opened them again, she was no longer in the attic. Amelia found herself in a different place altogether. It wasn't her grandfather's attic anymore. She looked around in surprise. She saw old buildings made of stone and wood. The streets were narrow and filled with people wearing clothes she had only seen in history books. Amelia couldn't believe her eyes. Where was she? How did she get here? And that's how Amelia's adventure began, all because of a small, old watch she found in her grandfather's attic. Chapter 2. Amelia's Trip to a Different Time. Amelia blinked and looked around. She wasn't in her grandfather's attic anymore. She was in a different place. The buildings were old and made of stone and wood. The streets were narrow. People were walking around wearing clothes that looked very different from what she knew. Amelia felt scared but also curious. Where was she? How did she get here? She looked down at the old watch in her hand. It was the watch she found in the attic. Did it bring her here? Amelia walked slowly through the crowded streets. She saw people selling fruits and vegetables. She saw children playing with wooden toys. Everything seemed so different from her own time. Amelia noticed that people were speaking in a language she didn't understand very well. Their words sounded strange to her ears. She tried to ask someone for help, but they looked at her strangely and walked away. Amelia didn't know what to do. She felt lost and confused. She wanted to go back home, but she didn't know how. She held on to the old watch tightly, hoping it would somehow help her return. But for now, Amelia had to figure out where she was and how to survive in this strange new place. She knew it wouldn't be easy, but she was determined to find a way back home. Chapter 3. Amelia learns about the old times. Amelia walked through the old town. The buildings were made of stones and wood. The streets were narrow and busy with people. They wore clothes that looked different from what she knew. Amelia saw shops selling things she had never seen before. There were fruits and vegetables piled high on wooden carts. People were talking loudly and some were laughing. It was all so strange to her. She walked cautiously, trying not to bump into anyone. Amelia saw children playing games with sticks and hoops. They looked at her with curious eyes. She smiled at them, but they looked away shyly. Amelia felt hungry. She saw a woman selling bread from a small stall. The bread looked crusty and smelled delicious. Amelia approached the stall and pointed to the bread. She held out a coin from her pocket. The woman looked at Amelia and then at the coin. She nodded and handed Amelia a piece of bread. Amelia thanked her and took a bite. It was crunchy on the outside and soft on the inside. She had never tasted bread like this before. As she walked on, Amelia saw a man making shoes. He had a small workshop with leather and tools spread out. The man smiled at her and showed her a pair of shoes he had just finished. They were simple, but well made. Amelia smiled back and tried to ask him about the town. The man spoke slowly, pointing to different places around them. Amelia tried to understand. She learned that the town was called Oakwood, and it was the year 1524. Amelia nodded, trying to remember everything the man told her. She realized she had traveled back in time nearly 500 years. It was incredible and scary at the same time. She explored more of Oakwood, marveling at the old buildings and the way people lived. She saw a blacksmith pounding metal into shapes. She watched as women spun wool into yarn using spinning wheels. Everywhere she went, people looked at her strangely. They were not used to seeing someone dressed like her. Amelia tried to blend in, walking with confidence and trying to learn their customs. As the days passed, Amelia learned more about life in Oakwood. She saw how people cooked over open fires and used candles for light at night. She learned how they bartered for goods instead of using money like she did. Amelia knew she couldn't stay in the past forever. She missed her family and friends back home. She missed her own time with its comforts and technology. But for now, she had to make the best of her situation. Amelia kept the old watch close, hoping it would somehow help her find a way back home. Chapter 4. Amelia Makes New Friends. As Amelia wandered through the old town of Oakwood, she felt lonely. She missed her family and friends from her own time, but she knew she had to be brave and try to make friends in this strange place. One day, as she was walking near the marketplace, Amelia noticed an old woman sitting at a small stall. The woman had a kind face and was surrounded by jars of colorful herbs and dried flowers. She looked like she knew a lot about the town and its people. Amelia approached the stall hesitantly. The old woman glanced up and smiled warmly at her. "Hello, young one," the woman said in a soft voice. "Are you new to Oakwood?" Amelia nodded shyly. Yes, I am. I'm not from around here. The old woman chuckled softly. That much is clear, my dear. What brings you to our humble town? Amelia hesitated, unsure of how much to say. I came here accidentally, she finally admitted, showing the old watch she held in her hand. With this. The old woman's eyes widened slightly as she looked at the watch. An interesting artifact indeed, she murmured. I am Agatha, the herb seller of Oakwood. What's your name, child? I'm Amelia, she replied with a small smile. Amelia, Agatha repeated thoughtfully. Well, Amelia, you are welcome here. Would you like to hear about our town? Perhaps I can help you understand a bit more about Oakwood. Amelia nodded eagerly. She was grateful for Agatha's kindness and wanted to learn as much as she could about this place. Agatha began telling Amelia stories about Oakwood. She told her about the history of the town, how it was founded many years ago by settlers who came from distant lands. She spoke of the old traditions and customs that were still followed by the people. Amelia listened intently, soaking in every detail. She learned about the festivals they celebrated, the foods they ate, and the ways they lived their daily lives. Agatha patiently answered Amelia's questions and helped her understand the language spoken by the people of Oakwood. As days passed, Amelia visited Agatha's stall often. They would talk about everything from the weather to the stars in the sky. Amelia learned which herbs were used for healing and which ones were used for cooking. She even helped Agatha arrange her jars and organize her stall. Slowly but surely, Amelia began to feel more at ease in Oakwood. She no longer felt like a stranger. The people in the marketplace started to smile and greet her warmly as she passed by. One afternoon, as Amelia sat with Agatha under a large oak tree near the town square, she realized how lucky she was to have met her new friend. Thank you, Agatha, Amelia said sincerely. You've been so kind to me. I don't know what I would have done without your help. Agatha patted Amelia's hand gently. It's been my pleasure, dear. You remind me of my own granddaughter. She's curious and full of life, just like you. Amelia smiled, feeling a warmth in her heart. She knew she had found a true friend in Agatha, someone who understood her and accepted her, even though she came from a different time. As the sun began to set over Oakwood, casting a golden glow on the cobblestone streets, Amelia knew she would cherish the memories of these days forever, and she was grateful for the old watch that had brought her to this place and introduced her to a friend like Agatha. Chapter 5. Amelia Misses Her Home. As Amelia spent more time in Oakwood, she began to miss her home. She missed her family and friends who were far away in her own time. She missed her cozy room and her favorite books. She even missed the familiar sounds of cars driving by and the hum of electricity. Every day as she walked through the old streets of Oakwood, Amelia thought about her home. She wondered what her parents were doing and if her friends were thinking about her too. She wished she could talk to them and tell them about her adventure. One evening, as she sat with Agatha under the oak tree, Amelia couldn't hold back her feelings any longer. Tears welled up in her eyes as she spoke softly. "I miss my home, Agatha," Amelia confessed. "I miss my family and everything I left behind. I never imagined I would be away for so long." Agatha placed a comforting hand on Amelia's shoulder. "It's natural to miss what's familiar to you, dear," she said gently. "Oakwood is a different place, and it can feel lonely sometimes. But remember, you have made friends here too." Amelia nodded, wiping her tears away. "I know," she said quietly. "You and the people of Oakwood have been so kind to me. I'm grateful for that." Agatha smiled warmly. "We are glad to have you here, Amelia. You bring a bit of brightness to our town." Despite the kindness of the people and her growing friendship with Agatha, Amelia couldn't shake the longing in her heart. She missed the comforts of her own time, the warmth of her bed, the smell of her favorite food cooking in the kitchen, and the laughter of her friends. As days turned into weeks, Amelia kept the old watch close to her. She would often look at it, wondering if it held the key to returning home. But the watch remained silent, its mysterious powers a puzzle she couldn't solve. One night, as she lay awake in her small room above the local inn where she stayed, Amelia stared out of the tiny window at the starry sky. She thought about her parents and how worried they must be not knowing where she was. She wished she could reassure them somehow. "I hope they know I'm safe," Amelia whispered to herself. "I hope they haven't given up hope of finding me." In moments like these, Amelia felt a deep ache in her heart. She knew she had to find a way back home, back to the people who loved her and missed her dearly. But as much as she longed for home, Amelia also treasured the time she spent in Oakwood. She had learned so much about the past and made friends who welcomed her with open arms. She knew she would carry these memories with her forever. As the days passed, Amelia continued to explore Oakwood and immerse herself in its history. She visited the old library and read ancient books filled with stories of knights and kings. She attended festivals where people danced and sang songs passed down through generations. Through it all, Amelia kept a small glimmer of hope in her heart, that one day she would find a way to unlock the mystery of the old watch and return to her own time. Until then, she held on to the memories of home and the strength of her newfound friendships in Oakwood. Chapter 6. Amelia Makes a Choice. One evening, as the sun set over Oakwood, Amelia sat quietly in her room at the inn. She held the old watch in her hands, turning it over and over as she thought about her situation. "I miss home so much," Amelia whispered to herself. "I miss everything about it, the familiar places, the faces of my family and friends." She sighed deeply, feeling torn between two worlds. On one hand, Oakwood had become a place of adventure and discovery. She had made friends like Agatha and learned so much about life in the past. But on the other hand, her heart ached for the comforts and familiarity of her own time. Amelia knew she couldn't stay in Oakwood forever. She had responsibilities back home and people who cared about her. but she also felt a sense of duty to try and find a way back. She looked at the old watch again, its metal casing glinting in the dim light of the room. She remembered how it had brought her to Oakwood with a simple click of its button. Could it also be the key to returning home? With a sudden determination, Amelia made up her mind. She would try to use the old watch to go back to her own time. She knew it was risky and uncertain, but she had to try. Taking a deep breath, Amelia stood up and walked over to the small table by the window. She placed the watch carefully on the wooden surface, her hands trembling slightly with anticipation. "All right," she said aloud, trying to steady her voice. "Here goes nothing." Amelia pressed the small button on the side of the watch. There was a soft click, and for a moment nothing happened. She held her breath, waiting anxiously. Then, suddenly, she felt a strange sensation, like she was being pulled in different directions at once. The room around her seemed to blur and shift. Colors swirled before her eyes, and she closed them tightly, trying to hold on to the feeling of being grounded. When she opened her eyes again, everything looked different. The room was no longer the familiar inn in Oakwood. Instead, she found herself standing in the attic of her grandfather's house. Amelia blinked in surprise, hardly daring to believe it. She looked around at the dusty boxes and old furniture, feeling a rush of relief and disbelief. I'm home," she whispered, her voice filled with wonder. She clutched the old watch tightly in her hand, unable to stop the tears that welled up in her eyes. She had made it back to the place she had thought she might never see again. Amelia knew she had been given a second chance, a chance to reunite with her family, to share her incredible journey, and to cherish the memories she had made in Oakwood. The old watch had brought her home just as mysteriously as it had taken her away. As she stood in the attic, surrounded by the echoes of her own time, Amelia felt a deep sense of gratitude. She knew she would never forget the people she had met and the lessons she had learned during her time in the past. And as she held the old watch in her hand, Amelia couldn't help but smile. It was more than just an old artifact now. It was a symbol of her extraordinary adventure and the strength of her own courage and curiosity. Amelia knew she would always carry a piece of Oakwood with her, in her heart and in her memories. And whenever she looked at the old watch, she would be reminded of the incredible journey that had brought her back home. Chapter 7. Amelia returns home. Amelia stood in the attic of her grandfather's house. She blinked her eyes, hardly believing she was back home. The old watch she had found in the attic of Oakwood was still in her hand, its metal cool against her skin. "I'm really home," Amelia whispered to herself, a smile spreading across her face. She looked around at the familiar boxes and furniture. Everything was just as she remembered it. Amelia heard footsteps coming up the stairs. She turned around and saw her grandfather standing in the doorway, his eyes wide with surprise. "Amelia, is that really you?" her grandfather exclaimed, rushing forward to hug her tightly. "We've been so worried." Tears filled Amelia's eyes as she hugged her grandfather back. "I'm here, Grandpa," she said softly. "I'm back." They stood there for a moment, holding on to each other. Amelia's heart swelled with love and gratitude. She was overwhelmed with emotions, relief, happiness, and a lingering sense of awe at everything she had experienced. After a while, Amelia's parents came rushing into the attic. They hugged her tightly, their eyes filled with tears of joy. "Oh, Amelia, we're so glad you're safe," her mother said, kissing her cheek. "We didn't know where you had gone." Amelia hugged her parents tightly, feeling their warmth and love surround her. "I'm sorry I worried you," she said softly. "I didn't mean to disappear like that." Her father smiled gently. "It's all right, sweetheart. What matters is that you're back now." They all sat down together in the attic, surrounded by the familiar sights and smells of home. Amelia told them everything about finding the old watch, traveling back in time to Oakwood, and the friends she had made there, especially Agatha. Her family listened intently, their eyes wide with amazement. They couldn't believe Amelia's incredible journey, but they knew she wouldn't make up such a story. "We're just glad you're safe," her grandfather said, patting her hand affectionately. "You've had quite an adventure, haven't you?" Amelia nodded, a smile playing on her lips. "Yes, Grandpa. It was scary at times, but also amazing. I learned so much about the past and about myself." Her parents hugged her again, feeling proud of their brave daughter. They knew she had grown during her time away and had gained a deeper appreciation for the world around her. As they talked late into the night, Amelia couldn't stop thinking about Oakwood and the people she had met there. She wondered how they were doing, and if they missed her as much as she missed them. The next day, Amelia visited her grandfather's attic again. She looked at the old watch in her hand, feeling a mix of emotions. It had brought her back home safely, but it also held memories of her time in Oakwood. Amelia knew she couldn't forget the lessons she had learned and the friendships she had made. She decided to keep the old watch as a reminder of her incredible journey, a journey that had changed her in ways she couldn't yet fully understand. As days turned into weeks and then months, Amelia settled back into her life at home. She returned to school and spent time with her friends. But she never forgot about Oakwood and the time she had spent there. Sometimes, late at night, Amelia would look up at the stars and think about the old watch. She wondered if there were other mysteries waiting to be discovered, other adventures waiting to unfold. But for now, Amelia was content knowing that she had found her way back home. And as she looked at the old watch, she knew that no matter where life took her next, she would always carry a piece of Oakwood with her, in her heart and in her memories. Chapter 8. Amelia remembers her journey. Amelia sat in her room, looking at the old watch in her hand. It had been several months since she returned from Oakwood, but the memories of her adventure were still fresh in her mind. She remembered the narrow streets and the old buildings of Oakwood. She remembered the kind faces of the people she met, like Agatha, the herb seller, who became her friend. Oakwood was so different from home, Amelia thought aloud. But I'm glad I went there. I learned so much. Amelia missed Oakwood sometimes. She missed the simple way of life and the sense of community she felt there. She missed the festivals and the stories people told. But most of all, Amelia missed Agatha. They had spent many hours together, talking and laughing under the old oak tree in the town square. Agatha had taught her about herbs and healing, and Amelia had helped her organize her stall. "I wonder how Agatha is doing," Amelia said quietly. "I hope she's well." Amelia kept in touch with Oakwood through letters. She wrote to Agatha and the other friends she made, telling them about her life back home. She received letters in return, filled with news about the town and its people. One day, Amelia received a special package in the mail. It was from Agatha. Inside was a small pouch filled with dried herbs and a handwritten note. "My dear Amelia," the note read, "I hope this parcel finds you well. I have sent you some of my favorite herbs from Oakwood. May they bring you comfort and remind you of our time together. With warmest regards, Agatha." Tears filled Amelia's eyes as she read the note. She held the pouch of herbs close to her heart, feeling a deep connection to her friend in Oakwood. Amelia kept the old watch on her bedside table. It reminded her of the adventure she had experienced and the lessons she had learned. She knew she would never forget the time she spent in Oakwood and the people who had welcomed her with open arms. As the years passed, Amelia grew older. She went to college and studied history, hoping to learn more about the past. She often thought about Oakwood and wondered if she would ever visit again. One day, while cleaning out her room, Amelia found the old watch tucked away in a drawer. She held it in her hands, feeling a rush of nostalgia. "Oakwood," she whispered, smiling at the memories. "I wonder if I'll ever go back." Amelia knew that even if she never returned to Oakwood, the memories of her journey would stay with her forever. The old watch had brought her home, but it had also opened her eyes to a world of possibilities and adventures. And as she placed the old watch back on her bedside table, Amelia made a promise to herself: to cherish the memories of Oakwood and to always keep the spirit of adventure alive in her heart.